And yeah, we had spent the week at the ranch trying to just finesse the final details because there's something about that place. It's like the spiritual home of Star Wars in a way. And so we wanted to, even if it was just in the water or just something to do with the land, we just wanted to be in the home of Star Wars. And I'd grown up looking at the images of Skywalker Ranch in behind the scenes books and things, and dreamed of like, oh my God, one day maybe you could visit, maybe something could happen where I might be able to be allowed in for a moment and stand there. Yeah. And then it came, and it was, you're making Star Wars, get going, off you go. And we were kind of given the keys to the kingdom. You could go into the archives, and there's all the original Millennium Falcon, the actual Death Star. There's the Ark of the Covenant from Raiders of the Lost Ark. Han Solo in Carbonite. It's got everything. Wow. And that was really surreal. But my favourite bit of all that was you go to the very back, and there's these drawers, and you pull them open, and there's the original artwork that inspired A New Hope. Yeah. And it's what they took to the studios to get the money to make Star Wars. And to me, that was like, these are like the holy grail of like what began it all. Yeah, we had it easier than George when he started, and in a way, if you were doing like Star Wars, to me has a lot more in common with not the future and science fiction, but the history, the past and history and mythology and anybody who makes a historical film like a war movie or something, they know how to make the soldiers look, they know how to make the helmets because it's real. We had the advantage of knowing a lot of that stuff because it had already been established in the original Star Wars films, but we were trying to give it a twist and a spin. For instance, if I get the name right, but there's a helmet called an M1 that was used in Vietnam, and I just wanted the Rebel helmets to just subconsciously feel like that. And we tried all these different designs, slightly different shapes, and it just didn't feel like real war until it was this certain silhouette. And so we were trying to borrow, obviously, from the originals, but give it a little twist. So you feel like, just like if you'd only ever seen, a modern car through, you're from another world, you've only ever seen one modern car. There are other cars, you know what I mean? You can see other ships, other robots, but they should feel like, oh, I get it. I see how that's connected. We definitely went, not to start with, we didn't sit down and go, okay, how are we going to do this? What's going to be the difference with it? It was more like, let's just try and make a film that we want to see as fans. What would it be? And as we experiment and play around, something that just bubbled to the surface was the feeling of trying to create a sense of realism in a war situation. And one of the little experiments we did was we took real war photography like Vietnam and World War II and the Middle East and stuff, and we photoshopped and changed the helmets to be Rebel helmets and the guns to be like Star Wars guns. And it was really engaging, and you were like, oh my God, I want to see that film. And we showed it to the studio, and they were like, that's fantastic, like, go make that movie. And so that's kind of what we ended up trying to do. Yeah, with the Death Troopers, the thing is, when you put an armor on a person, the person gets fatter, obviously, and then their silhouette looks like chunky, and we wanted people who looked like they could sprint, like that look really athletic, and so we had to cast people who were really thin and 7 foot tall. So by the time you put this little bit of armor around them, they would look like they could kill you if you gave them half a chance. It was strangely relaxing because you obviously have all this pressure, the whole world's watching and what you're going to do and how, what's the film going to be like. But the second you stand somewhere and there's stormtroopers, and X-Wings and Yavin and things like this, you suddenly just feel like a kid and you feel like you've gone back home. So it's very comforting to be in those environments making a film. And we all turned 40 whilst we were filming. Like, we were about 2 years old when the film came out, and there was so many birthdays, 40th birthdays that we had to celebrate, and I had one. And I think it was just everyone who loved Star Wars wanted to get into the film industry and somehow found their way towards this film, and it was a really amazing thing. It was so much love for it. For my 30th, before any of this happened, before I directed stuff, I thought I got to do something special for my 30th. So I went to Tunisia and I stayed the night in Luke Skywalker's house where they shot the original Star Wars film, and I watched the sunset by the igloo that's in the middle of the salt flats. And at the time, it was like, okay, what are you going to do for your 40th? You're never going to beat that.
My Nerd World.
So just a couple of comments there from Gareth Edwards talking about the directing process, how they came up with the story for Rogue One. There was one story that he was telling, and I wasn't able to find the clip, but it was basically that George Lucas had visited the set, and you've seen it in the trailers where they have the hover tank, and it's going through what looks a bit like Mos Eisley. It's on Jeddah, but it's a military occupation of the stormtroopers sort of going through the streets of the city, and they're on this hover tank. And apparently, George saw the stormtrooper, and my understanding of what he said was he suggested that you should make that a special stormtrooper. It shouldn't be a regular stormtrooper. It should be, you have a unique helmet. It should have something different. He's driving a hover tank. And when you go back to the original Star Wars, of course, that's what George did. If you were in a different vehicle as part of the Empire, you had a different aesthetic. You had a different look. They weren't all looking the same. And that's what really lent itself to a lot of little tiny details that made the original trilogy and the whole universe so special. And he carried that into the prequels. When you look at the clone troopers, depending on what their rank was, depending on what their job was, depending on what vehicle they were flying, they looked different. And some people would, of course, say, well, that was for the merchandise. No, man, I say that's for the story. I think that makes it cool. It makes it different. It's not unlike, to a certain extent, the real life. You're not going to see somebody in the military driving a tank wearing the same clothing and outfit as you're going to see them wearing if they're in an F-35. So it lends itself to, again, that relatability. Oh, that's a TIE fighter pilot. Oh, that's a hover tank pilot. Oh, that's a shore trooper. Now, going back to Lucas, since I'm on Lucas here real quick, going back to George Lucas, I had tweeted out a retweet that Gareth Edwards had said that George saw the movie and called him and said that he loved it and that he could die happy now. You can imagine for a guy like, I would think you could. You should be able to imagine if you're Gareth Edwards what that must mean to him. Gareth has said that growing up a Star Wars fan as a little kid, when he would go to school, he would watch the opening sequence, I guess the first 15 minutes of A New Hope every day before he went to school. And then the next morning he would start it over again, and he would watch it over and over again. I mean, that's the effect that movie had on us as kids. We are so spoiled now as adults. Which, by the way, quick side note, I think that's going to end at some point. What I mean by that is there's an aging out of us Star Wars fans. And when Star Wars came out, when you think about the lack of available, apart from the theater content, whether it's the movies themselves, right? I remember getting bootleg VHS copies when we first got our VHS player, for crying out loud, when I was a kid. And then the movie came out. I was like, oh my gosh, we have it on videotape. We can watch it whenever we want, and wearing out those videotapes. But you didn't, of course, you didn't have the internet. You had some magazines. I remember, and I've told the story before, I remember going to the library over in Monrovia. It might have been Temple City. But I remember going to the library and picking up a magazine that had a section on Return of the Jedi with photos of the movie. And it was the first time that I'd seen any pictures, set pictures of what the film was going to look like. And there was one picture of Luke on Dagobah, and he's sitting down. It's a very famous shot. If you saw the picture, the still frame from the movie, you would recognize it instantly, not just being from The Empire Strikes Back, but that particular frame. Yoda standing there talking with Luke right after Luke tries to pull the X-Wing out of the swamp using the Force. Well, Luke had he was sitting down sort of almost crisscross applesauce, and he had his arms were crossed, and it looked like his hand was chopped off. And in the photo, and I remember thinking, and what's funny about that is I didn't know what happened in the movie. And so I had thoughts of Luke losing his hand long before Luke lost his hand, which was very strange, right? So, anyways, more to my point. We didn't have access to all these things as kids. So the mythology of Star Wars really grew inside of us with friends in the books, in the comic books. And so so many of us were so hungry for this rich environment that we got our hands on whatever little we could as kids, that as we got older and as we get more, we can't get enough of it. We just can't. You can't get enough of Star Wars, which is something else I'm going to bring up towards the end of the podcast. Don't worry, I have notes. I'm keeping track here. All right, so to the point of what I was saying a moment ago, George Lucas, Gareth Edwards, huge fan. Lucas loves the movie. I retweeted this, okay, and a friend of my radio show during the week, Justice and Drew on Twin Cities News Talk, TwinCitiesNewsTalk.com. You can also find us, Justice and Drew, on iTunes. He said after episodes 1 through 3 and the Han Solo retcon in episode 4. Why would George Lucas's opinion matter at all? Now, I assume he's talking about the Greedo Han shot first deal, which is such a petty thing for people to still be annoyed by. And then, of course, he's referring to the prequels, episodes 1 through 3. Why would George Lucas's opinion matter? Okay, it's almost worthless to get into an argument with somebody like this. I retweeted and responded and just said the answer is kind of obvious. It's George Lucas. It does matter. He created this universe. He still has good ideas, right? George was pushing the boundaries of what he could do in storytelling. And he touched upon some magic in the original trilogy based off of his limitations. Well, we got to see those limitations expanded out in the prequel trilogy, which brought us a lot of great, new, rich history. I had such a hard time with people that hate on the prequels. It is very annoying, but of course it matters. He still is the guy. And when I read this morning that George Lucas saw the movie and loved it, I was really excited and happy. That really, really meant a lot to me. I think it means a lot that the creator has something to say and his input with what people are doing with the galaxy that he created.
There has been an awakening. Have you felt it?
All right, let's get to another clip from Rogue One. And I'll explain the reason why I'm playing this particular clip after I play the clip. This is a scene with K2SO, Jyn Erso, and Cassian Andor. Clearly, and these aren't spoilers by any stretch, but clearly this is some point towards the beginning of the film. She's been taken in by the rebels, obviously still isn't being trusted yet, even though they need her to complete this task, okay, of, stealing the Death Stars. They need her information for whatever reason. I haven't seen the film yet, so I don't know. There's actually a portion of this clip. I was a little bummed out. I grabbed this. There's a longer version. There's a snippet of this towards the beginning of it that was cut out where you hear K2SO talk about Jyn having a gun. Cassian asks her, "Where'd you get that gun?" And she says, "Well, I found it over here." And then the clip will continue. It still contextually makes sense when you hear it. And I don't know what ship they're in. That's the other part of this I'm a little bit confused by, because it doesn't look like the inside of a U-Wing, and it doesn't look big enough to be the inside of one of the new Imperial transport ships that we see, the one with the big 4 wings. So be that as it may, let me play this clip for you, and then I'll make a comment afterwards.
Why does she get a blaster and I don't?
What?
I know how to use it.
That's what I'm afraid of. Give it to me.
We're going to Jeddah. That's a war zone.
That's not the point of it. Where'd you get it?
I found it.
I find that answer vague and unconvincing.
Trust goes both ways.
You're letting her keep it. Would you like to know the probability of her using it against you? It's high.
Let's get going.
It's very high.
So, first off, the acting seems pretty spot on. K2SO, if you've been watching any of the trailers, it's obvious this is going to be a fan favorite and is going to steal a big portion of this film. Everybody that's seen it so far has said he is absolutely a highlight. Alan Tudyk, an actor who does not get enough credit in my view. He played the pilot, spoiler alert, who died in Serenity, the pilot of Serenity of the Firefly. Also has been in a couple different Michael Bay Well, I know he's in one Transformers movie. He also did the motion capture work for iRobot, the Will Smith movie that I actually enjoyed quite a bit. He played the main robot in that film. So